everybody, you're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Billy Z.
And I'm Steve Morey.
And we have another Brian-less episode. Oh, I like that phrase, Brian-less.
Brian-less.
We got to keep that. Nothing too bad, though, folks.
Brian.
Brian's just traveling for work, and we're hoping that he'll be back on the next episode where we finally bring to you our favorite picks of 2018. But until then, we wanted to come to you, to talk about a particular event that has been dominating the box office, both here in the States and around the world. And, of course, we are talking about the Aquaman film. So we're going to be talking about the film, what we thought about it, and we're also going to be highlighting some of our picks in relation to Aquaman and comics. Steve is going to be handling some of the more recent events, and I'll be, be my classic DC zombie self and handle a bit more of the historic ones. We're also going to be giving you a bit of a rundown in relation to the films we expect to see in 2019 that are based on comic book films. So looking ahead, looking behind, and looking at the present. That was a dumbass transition to nothing. So, how were your holidays, Steve? Apart from, we know something really unfortunate happened, but you have a good holiday apart from that?
Yeah. I, what Bill is alluding to is, we lost our, very sweet, one of our cats, Paolo, who was 16 years old, on Christmas Eve. We had to put him to sleep. We had to say goodbye. So it was very kind of an unexpected cloud over the holidays. But otherwise, got to spend a lot of time with Jason. We went to the movies on Christmas Day, which was a first for me. And just had a nice, quiet, long week. Just the two of us, just kind of keeping it mellow and enjoying each other's company, which was great. And now, of course, it's back to work in 2019. How about you?
Well, I was sick for most of the holiday period and battling. It's weird. I went to get a flu shot and then I got sick, but I didn't get the flu. I just got this really, really bad cold. And it colored a bunch of things. I couldn't go up to New England with my partner to visit his parents. So I was home binging TV a lot. And I ended up binging all of Runaways' second season and 11/22/63. Boy, does this sound like I have a tryout Hulu membership? Yes, that's what happened, folks. And a bunch of other things. But by the time New Year's Eve rolled around, I was back to fighting fit. And my friends Sharon and Andrew throw a big New Year's Eve party every year, and we go to that, and we had a great time. So.
Well, that's great.
Yep.
That's really cool.
I got to tell you, though, even though I was working from home on the 2nd through the 4th, man, that was tough. It was tough to get back into swing of things. Oh. Yeah.
I think that's been pretty much everybody's experience. It was just it was a pretty exhausting 2018. So you kind of didn't want to have to face the next coming year right away. But we're all kind of in the thick of it. And politics aside, it looks like it's going to be a really exciting year.
Well, let's get moving on this, shall we? Steve, tell us about Aquaman.
Aquaman was a good film.
Oh, that's another thing. For you, is it Aquaman or Aquaman?
Aqua. Aqua. Yeah, I mean it's always a broad A instead of a short nasal A. I don't know.
I just always carried it over from Spanish lessons. Yeah.
Agua.
Yeah.
So just a quick synopsis, and I wrote it down this time so I don't meander too much. But so Arthur Curry, the media-dubbed Aquaman, is back from the events from Justice League, and he's trying to essentially return to his life of drinking, hanging out in bars, hanging out with his dad, and in general depressed coastal fishing towns, which apparently is pretty cool for him. But he's unfortunately pulled back into the events in Atlantis to try and prevent a war against the surface world. His half-brother Orm is attempting to unite the various clans of Atlanteans to become the new Ocean Master and take the fight to the surface. Thankfully, with Mira, who is of course, princess from one of the other kingdoms, and a water witch and powerful warrior in her own right, they set off to find the lost trident of the legendary King Atlan, which is the only thing that can successfully and peacefully unite the various undersea kingdoms, and also prove his position as the hero, not just the king, but the hero of Atlantis. In the meantime, and along the way, they basically have to fight against Orm's various evil machinations, as well as Black Manta, a villain who Aquaman essentially had a part in giving birth to, who's been helping Orm to exact, in his quest to exact revenge on Arthur, who he blames for the death of his pirate father. So along the way, of course, lots of action scenes, some fun, cheesy jokes, and lots of broing out by Jason Momoa. Jason Momoa, of course, reprising his role as Aquaman, Amber Heard as Mira, and even Dolph Lundgren makes an interesting appearance as King Nereus, who is Mira's father, and Patrick Wilson playing Ocean Master. But yeah, I mean, it's my personal impression of this movie. I thought it was great fun. It was goofy, it was loud, it was exciting, it had some great, amazing graphics. The way that they presented Atlantis and the various undersea realms was beautiful. I think whoever designed that, the massive crew of artists that took part in sort of realizing this, just did an amazing job. It was at times futuristic and otherworldly, but also very much in line with an oceanic, a Nautilus kind of theme. And I love the aesthetic. I love the underwater effect, which was not at all intrusive, and looked, as natural as it can be, because essentially they spend almost the entire movie underwater, with CGI hair flowing all over the place. But because everyone's got long hair except for Patrick Wilson, it seems.
But even he's kind of got like a bun thing going on.
Yeah, he's got a weird sort of like swept back sort of reverse duck's ass thing going on, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great fun. Is it a well-written film? Not necessarily. And from a direction standpoint, I mean, other than sort of wrangling the CGI and basically letting Jason Momoa kind of be himself, James Wan really probably didn't have to do all that much when it comes down to it. But obviously whatever he did worked, because it is and has remained the number one film. I don't think it's been deposed yet. In about the last 6 or 7 weeks.
Oh no, it's not. It's fourth. Going to enter its fourth week at number one.
Well, in the U.S. But
in the U.S.,
they made the interesting choice of actually premiering it 2 weeks early in China, where it's gone on to make $300 million out of its total foreign accumulation. So that was an interesting choice, but not necessarily a surprise, because James Wan has made a lot of money in the past there with his Fast and Furious film, and I think has there's some cultural connection obviously there that the Chinese moviegoers might feel with a Chinese descent filmmaker at the helm, but clearly this film is a little bit more broad in its appeal, because it seems to be doing well everywhere that it's premiered so far. I think we're still waiting for a couple markets to have it come out in the theaters, but otherwise, everywhere where it premiered at number one, and in some places it's been hanging on. One of those places, of course, being the U.S.
I'm going to disagree with you on something you said there.
Sure.
And that's the notion of I don't exactly know what James Wan was doing. I'm going to disagree with you there vociferously, because I always harken back to Green Lantern. And Green Lantern was a film that, to its detriment, was clearly a film made by committee. You didn't have a sense of a director providing the general scope of the film. You could feel interference while you were watching it. And with this film, it must have been a hell of a task to wrangle all these elements together. I totally agree with you. My first description of the film is this big dumb fun.
Yeah.
I think it was the kind of film that the DC Extended Universe needed at this particular point. At least three of the films have a joyless tag to them, and with this one, boy, did that dispel that. We know Shazam is coming up, and that looks like it's just on a completely different track. But I think in terms of the tone of the film, I don't want to speculate in terms of franchise saver or whatever, but it's the kind of film that DC needed. I thought it was a great cast. I think Momoa is up there at this point with Robert Downey Jr. and Christopher Reeve in terms of owning a particular comic-based character. I can't see anybody in this part unless it's a radical reinterpretation a la seeing like a live action version of the Brave and the Bold Aquaman, with the outrageous, whoever stands in this man's shoes or fins or whatever you want to put it, has a hell of a task ahead of them. I know, especially with comic fans, that Aquabro is not necessarily everyone's cup of tea, but wish some of those people would just relax and just see how well this works. A lot of that capacity. I am not a format snob in relation to seeing films. With this one, though, I made sure that I saw it in IMAX and in IMAX 3D to experience it like that. Like particular scenes, like when they were coming out of the trench in IMAX and in 3D. Oh my God, it was just magical. It really was.
I agree. Like we also, that was the one thing for a movie like this, seeing it in the, biggest format possible or the brightest format or 3D, however you can do it so that it's the most bombastic you can think about is perfect. I mean, the sound is great, the tension and the, and the driving. And I wish Brian were here because he would talk a lot about the score, I would think. Which for me, most times, depending on the film, like it's just sort of like background noise that kind of, leads you along subconsciously or consciously into whatever emotional, trap that the director set for you. But I think it did a great job in keeping the excitement up without letting it go too dark. And, and that I think is one of the big things about this movie compared to a lot of the other DC films is that it's definitely a lot lighter. The color palette alone is miles ahead of any of the other previous movies except for, and I'm actually going to include Wonder Woman in that because Wonder Woman did have quite a big chunk of it where it was, had sort of that blue tint, that blue wash. I guess it did indicate the period more and the fact that it was in a war zone for a big chunk of it. But this one is just, it is Technicolor to end all Technicolors. It is bright. It is colorful. Even the dark moments, there are bursts of deep color, color saturation. And it changes the tone overall, not just what you're seeing, but also how you feel when you're watching it. And I think that was something that DC really needed to have. They needed to have that type of movie. Wonder Woman, of course, is on a different level because there's a much more deep significance to the fact that it's Wonder Woman on screen, and there was a lot more emotional resonance, I think. But Aquaman is proof that DC can make a fun movie again post Christopher Nolan Batman movies. They can make a movie that is bright and colorful like Batman and Robin or Batman Forever or the original Superman, but also has a lot of isn't over the top or goofy like, say, Batman and Robin and Batman Forever were. So, it's over top in a different way, but it's not overly goofy. It's got enough, I guess, street cred to go with it that
Right.
You're not going to just roll your eyes and say, whatever.
The only part I thought that bordered on that was when you saw the octopus playing the drums. And
that
but my feeling is,
that was
to me, that's like with comic books with Mr. Talkie Tawny. If you can't get into a talking tiger who wears a bow tie, you shouldn't be reading comic books. If you can't get into an octopus playing drums during a war battle, you probably shouldn't be seeing superhero-based films.
Well, and let's just say the very unique cameo of Julie Andrews in this film. And what's funny, the same day we saw this on Christmas Day, actually. After this film, we went and saw Mary Poppins 2. And it was funny that there was connective tissue between the two of them because of Julie Andrews, who, of course, just spoilers, by the way, everyone, she does not appear in Mary Poppins 2. But the fact that she does appear in Aquaman very unexpectedly is it's great. That's one of those sort of like, the really good fudgy chocolate at the bottom of the box of chocolates. So it's, it was a ton of fun. I do kind of want to go back to what you had said about the sort of broing out of Aquaman and how some longtime readers and some longtime fans of Aquaman may not really like that interpretation. And actually, I talked to my husband Jason about this, and he kind of, even though he really loved the movie, he kind of is in that camp as well. And he grew up with the Super Friends version of Aquaman, and that Aquaman, of course, is more of a compassionate problem solver. His main power is really communication. He communicates with sea life and uses them, to solve problems, as well as, he's very much a talker. Like, he's not gonna just punch first and then ask questions later. He's very calm and logical, but also, is friends with everything in the sea at the same time. And it's just that kind of very, compassionate and friendly version of Aquaman. Sure, that's the one that a lot of people tend to make fun of. I mean,
and
Robot
certainly
Chicken
far
is
more regal. I think you have to add that element in there when you talk
a little
about
bit more
that particular
stoic
description. Yeah,
exactly. More of a King of Atlantis as, old style, King Arthur, which of course Aquaman is modeled after, in that respect. But also kind of makes him the heel of the jokes. It's like, he's the four-eyed goof, basically, who always does the right thing, and talks to fish. But here, of course, Aquaman, like Jason Momoa, is a character in of himself, and he really just kind of put himself in this version of Aquaman, and it's really great. It's a great interpretation of Aquaman. I mean, it makes Aquaman, half Polynesian, which is really cool, and adds to that kind of representation of a very underrepresented group of people on the big screen. But at the same time, he's also a surfer dude. He's kind of sarcastic. He's heavy drinking, kind of tough guy who can hold his own. And it's not so much a talking to fish kind of thing, although that does come up at times, and of course in the big climax. But he's definitely a badass bro. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but I do understand how that changed. And I think it's really Jeff Johns who kind of started that. I think. I
disagree with that because I don't think that interpretation has ever permeated the comic book at all. It's just not there. I don't know.
I mean, but prior to Johns, I mean, you had his really dark period where he loses a hand and he's got a massive pointy hook thing for a hand, grows his hair out long, gets the beard, and is just dark and broody. And then, of course, in Jeff Johns' take in New 52, where he's he has the regalness, he has that sort of royal bearing, but he's also kind of mean, just sort of like
I don't see that as aligning with Aquabro at all. I don't see that at all.
No, not necessarily Aquabro.
Okay,
so that's the thing, not necessarily Aquabro, but just sort of making.
Just talking about a deviation from what we've been talking about. Okay,
exactly.
That'll. It seems like the seeds of that were really planted in a very brief period with the Flashpoint Aquaman. It seems that there was some connective tissue with that interpretation that continued on with the New 52. The few bits of connective tissue.
Kind of a hard, but he's a hard dude, and I think that's one of those things where a lot of writers in the past have kind of taken him on. I have a feeling that there's this kind of defensiveness, or maybe even protectiveness, that writers who really like Aquaman want other people to see how cool he is to them, and try to make him a little bit harder, a little bit more of a tough guy, and as far away from that sort of butt of the joke, of the Super Friends joke, as possible, which has mixed results. I think here they do a great job by, here he is, he's a badass bro, Aquaman, who clearly has a lot more universal appeal and has a lot of people who usually would leave him as the butt of a joke are now sort of saying how much they really enjoy Aquaman. He's like, oh, he's cool. He's really awesome. But if you're more of a fan of maybe how Aquaman had started out and how, people had been nurturing his character for a long time, a more regal, more compassionate, whatever, I could see how this could be a little jarring. This version of Aquaman. And this being, of course, the one that's going to, I think, supplant a lot of people's ideas, or at least in the general population who may not be big comic book fans or big Aquaman fans. This might supplant their idea of Aquaman that a lot of people have kind of had, the 1960s cartoon, or the, Super Friends version, or the more sort of, compassionate, as you said, more knightly version.
What was your first exposure to Aquaman?
Super Friends.
Yep.
For me, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I even had the action figure.
What, the superpowers?
Yeah, I think I even had a Superpowers action figure of him, where he had the little thing on the back that would kick his legs.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have a custom Aqualad based on that figure too, with a beautiful paint job. Well, mine wasn't too far off. My first exposure to Aquaman was in the New York market when they showed the repeats of the Filmation cartoons from the 60s. We didn't get the Superman cartoons. What we got was, this was on Channel 5, you got Aquaman and then the Lone Ranger, which were not Filmation. There was this really weird, strange watercolor version of the Lone Ranger that had a cartoon in the 60s. And then you got the Batman Filmation cartoons. Or it would be Batman, Lone Ranger, Aquaman. It switched, but it seemed to always be those three characters. There was some link in relation to the Filmation Aquaman, which, had Aqualad as his trusty sidekick, and of course that lovable Tusky the Walrus.
Tusky!
That's one thing it's interesting. If you do look back at those Filmation cartoons, you do have Black Manta, you do have the Fisherman, you do have some things that came directly from the comics. With Aquaman being part of the Super Friends, you also have an additional link in that Ted Knight was the narrator for both the Filmation and then later for Super Friends. And it's certain things I just love about Ted Knight doing the narration. Oh, it's just so beautiful, like, and Aquaman, to save Tusky the Walrus from the clutches of the Ocean Master, sends a barracuda, an electric eel, and a crab. And, the crab always did the most work.
Yeah.
If you've never seen the Filmation cartoons, people watch them. They're adorable. There's like 3 or 4 Aquaman action poses you just keep seeing again and again in reused animation. That was my first exposure, but it was really close in time. It was, I would say, like, Super Friends was when I was 6, and the Filmation cartoons were when I was like 5.5. It was that close. Just like with you, again, we have a couple of years in distance of age. The first Mego action figures I ever got were on the same day, and it was Superman and Aquaman. First exposure pretty early on. The only things I want to say about the film that I don't think we covered, I do think in relation to special effects that it is ridiculous that the film wasn't shortlisted for visual effects nominee.
I mean, just the artistic, the imagination and creativity that went into creating the city of Atlantis, the design for all of the creatures, which again, they're taking inspiration from the comics, but to translate that onto the big screen in a way that makes it look real or natural, or natural, it was fantastic.
It's an important aspect that you're talking about, the naturalness. You bought Black Mantis tech. You bought the trench. That's one omission that I think is really sad. And also, if you haven't seen the film yet, people, one of the best action sequences is right at the beginning. We all know that it was Nicole Kidman's body double or CGI, but in my head, there's a little part of me that hopes that the majority of that was Nicole Kidman kicking ass. I thought that entire sequence with the home invasion was amazing. I thought that was one of the best action scenes I've ever seen.
No, I agree. I think it was, every time you get close quarters fighting, which seems to be pretty in vogue right now, for a lot of the action comic series on TV. Daredevil really kind of kicked it off, and a lot of other shows have been following suit, or maybe even Arrow kind of started that. I don't know, but it's something getting those really good close quarter action sequences where they're using the environment very well, considering that there's not a lot of space to fight in, which I think this was great. And yeah, Nicole Kidman or her body double did an amazing job.
All right, well, I just wanted to talk very briefly about what we have to look forward to in 2019. Then we'll get back on track with Aquaman stuff. Since we were specifically talking about the film, and 2019 is a year where we have a tremendous amount. Oh, Jesus, I used the Trump word. But we have a tremendous amount of comic book related films to look forward to. I'm going to go down the list and we'll talk about them a little bit. And if there's anything that I mentioned, Steve, that you're particularly excited about, please chime in, okay?
Okie dokie.
Okay, so on February 14th, 2019, and again, folks, for international listeners, and I know there's like 4 of you, we are talking about U.S. release dates. We have Alita Battle Angel, which is based on a manga. Steve, is this a manga you've read? I've never read Battle Angel.
I've never read the manga, but I've seen the anime that it was based on. Or sorry, yeah, that based on the manga. Yes, there we go. Prepositions. It was one of those big animes that actually was available in the 90s in the US. There wasn't a lot out there that wasn't already sort of like dubbed on TV or just sort of a retelling or an American edit of something. But Alita was one that was straight to video, that if you could find it in Suncoast Video somewhere or at a Virgin Records or whatever, a Virgin Megastore, that was one that people picked up.
Okay.
Fun and exciting.
Yeah. You are excited to see that?
I am, and I didn't think I would be because, again, I'm kind of out of my anime and manga phase. I wasn't in high school, but at the same time, I think what we've seen so far in the trailers is at least pretty. She's the character herself, the actress is mostly CGI, based on an actual physical actress, but it looks pretty good so far. I don't know how it'll all translate. We may have just seen all the best bits in the trailer, but it might be good.
Okay, well, on March 8th, we head back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Captain Marvel, and though not named Captain Marvel, on April 5th, we have Shazam. April 12th, we have the reboot of Hellboy. On April 26th, we have Avengers Endgame, which closes out this current phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then after that, we bounce over to the X-Men with either titled X-Men Dark Phoenix or just Dark Phoenix. On June 14th, we have Men in Black International with a healthy dose of the Thor Ragnarok cast.
Yeah, exactly. Might as well be Thor Ragnarok 0.5. Except this time they're in suits.
Then we go back to the Marvel Universe and the start of their new phase with Spider-Man Far From Home. July 5th, August 2nd, we have another long-delayed film, New Mutants from Fox.
Well, is that still going to be August 2nd? Because I think that they were going to be shuffling that a little bit more, or maybe they shuffled to August 2nd.
Yeah, I think it got moved from May to August. Yeah.
I mean, that one got bumped twice, unfortunately. Yeah. I've been looking forward to it for 2 years. Yeah. And actually going back to Spider-Man, By the way, spoilers, kids. Apparently he survives Thanos' snap. Just FYI, didn't want to really ruin your day, but spoilers.
And then we have a non-superhero comic book based film coming out on September 20th, which is the adaptation of Vertigo's The Kitchen, which
I'm looking forward to that.
yeah, I'm looking forward to this too. It's an amazing cast. Tiffany
yeah.
Haddish, Melissa McCarthy, and Elizabeth Moss. They're basically mob wives.
Irish mob wives.
Irish mob wives. So Tiffany in that mix ought to be really funny.
Hey, it's an interesting casting choice, but given the character that I suspect she's playing, I think it fits perfectly.
Yep. And then we round out 2019 on October 4th. We have the standalone Joker film starring Joaquin Phoenix. And the last, as of this date, film based on a comic book property that's going to be appearing in 2019 is the Kingsman prequel, which has a title of Kingsman: The Great Game. So those are the films we have to look forward to. Again, not mentioning the various direct-to-video, or I don't even know how you would characterize those right now.
Direct-to-digital, I think.
Direct-to-digital.
They've been saying a lot, yeah.
Yeah, DC animated films. So we have a lot to look forward to in relation to comic book-based films.
And technically, I guess Lego Movie 2 kind of fits in there a little bit because a lot of the DC characters end up in that. But here's my question for you about Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's actually going to happen on that date, or do you think they might push it back?
I think it's going to happen on that date. Why would you think that there might be delays? Because from what I understand, it's almost wrapped up filming already.
I think that's why. I think it's one of those things where they announced it and immediately rushed into production, or at least made it seem like it was rushed into production pretty quickly. Yeah. So it may have been one of those situations where it's all one of those very rare situations where, hey, we've been doing a lot of work on this behind the scenes and we just didn't let anything get out. Mm-hmm. So that people would know about it. But I'm kind of concerned at the speed that this has come together, because really it seems to me like only a year and a half total time between when it was announced that Joaquin Phoenix was going to star in a Joker movie and when it's set to come out. Yeah. So usually these take a little bit more time and development to happen. So we'll see what comes out of it.
Yeah. Well, last time that Robert De Niro played a talk show host on screen, it worked out pretty well for me. So I'm very much looking forward to Joker. Out of these films, again, I go back to being a DC guy. For me, it's Shazam and Joker. Of course, I want to see what the resolution in Endgame is. Of course, with how much I've enjoyed Tom Holland in the Marvel films, I want to see this. But still comes down to DC for me. I got to be honest. They're the ones I'm really looking forward to. I was not excited from what I saw in relation to the Hellboy trailer. And I don't think I'm alone on that island. Just didn't seem that exciting.
I just think the trailer, whoever edited it, and I know it's tough to edit a trailer when a movie's still technically in production or post-production, but it wasn't great of a trailer. It does not give you much if at all to go on in terms of what the story is. And for those of you out there who have read the 3 arcs that it's based on, it's basically what is it, the Wild Hunt, oh god, I'm going to forget all of them, but anyway, there's 3 of them that sort of bring the cycle, and we're essentially like the 3 last big arcs for Hellboy specifically. And that led into Hell on Earth and The Devil You Know, which are, basically the wrapping up series, as well as Hellboy in Hell, that have been going on the past several years. But it's interesting to me that they would start with this one for a reboot, because usually in a reboot you want to start closer to the beginning, not at the end. They really don't give much out there for the Blood Queen, who's being played by Mila Jovovich. They don't really show you much of what she is or what she's supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think a lot of people who are going to be focusing more on how Hellboy looks as David Harbour, how he looks as Hellboy, and comparing him to Ron Perlman. It's going to be a different interpretation there, but I think the rest of the dressing of the trailer kind of didn't really do it justice. And I'm hoping that as we get closer to the date, there's going to be a much better trailer. Because Hellboy deserves a big audience, a much bigger audience that even the first two got. So.
All right, so we've talked about the films that are coming up. We talked about Aquaman. We talked about our first exposure to Aquaman. And we want to send you over to the comic book world that if you are unfamiliar with Aquaman comics, some things that you might be interested in reading. Now, Aquaman is a character which has been appearing in print since at least a cover date of November 1941. He's a character that survived the Golden Age into the Atomic Age implosion. Apart from DC's big three of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, there were very few characters that continued publication into the Silver Age. Aquaman was one of them, the other big example being Green Arrow. Aquaman didn't have his own series until 1961, if I have the date right. Yes, November 28th, 1961 was when he finally received his own title. You do see the mythos building in regards to Atlantis and him being the king of the undersea world, and the supporting cast gradually developing. Aqualad introduced in the late 50s, Mira in the early 60s. One book that I would recommend was when the Aquaman series in the late 60s and early 70s really got going. Again, most of the stories for the first few years were these done ones that really didn't have a lot of resonance or impact beyond the confines of the 22 to 24 pages of the story. There was a seismic shift when Dick Giordano came on as an editor at DC. Aquaman was one of the titles he was given. And with the Aquaman number 40 issue was when they had a change in writer and artist. Steve Skates became the writer, and Jim Aparo, pre-Brave and the Bold and his other work in relation to Batman. This really was his first big DC project after working for a number of years at Charlton. There was a recently issued collection which is called The Disappearance of Mira, which concerned Aquaman's search for Mira. At that point, he had been, at least in real time, had been married for 3 years. And all of a sudden, his wife disappears. And he goes on an odyssey for a number of issues to search for what happened. It's a really good, again, very much a Silver Age or Silver into Bronze Age book. It does have a lot of the pitfalls that reading those books through a modern perspective entail, but you do get a sense of Aquaman's world and the world of the Undersea Kingdom and his villains when you do hit the appearance of Black Manta in the third installment of the series. It's very, very potent. And this was a team which lasted for about 2 years, and they're really, really well done stories. And the collection collects numbers 40 through 48. The title was then canceled with number 56. I love that particular time period where the 60s were ending and the 70s were starting a bit prematurely. It's a pretty good collection. And when I started reading Aquaman was when he was a backup feature in Adventure Comics, and these really inconsequential stories with the Spectre, and a very, very prestigious run of the Spectre in the lead spot in Adventure Comics. But after the Spectre arc was done, and given Aquaman's position in Super Friends in Media Outside Comics at the time, they gave him the lead story, and with a series of adventures that were for the most part written by David Michelini, but there's a couple of other writers in the mix there. You had a very politicized version of Aquaman, and these stories are all collected in a trade called The Death of a Prince. Now, The Death of a Prince is a literal descriptive of the events that conclude the collection, and this was one of the biggest shocks for me as a very young comic reader in the 70s. And this is not a spoiler, people. You know, it's all over there, where due to the machinations of one of his chief villains, Aquaman's young son dies. they went there in the 70s. You can see, again, we've been talking about, how your initial perception of the character was this, as we had put, Steve, the regalness, the
I guess there's a form of dignity,
dignity,
like
yes, yes.
knightly dignity, where
You're
it's
right.
almost chivalrous,
Right.
but
And as
not.
you said, that's what, and
Yeah.
again, a communication-based character. And
Yeah.
here you do see that pushed to the limit, and you do see him a bit more gritty than maybe you would have expected from 70s comics. There is one wonderful series of Aquaman stories which has never been collected, and for the life of me, I don't know why, because in terms of shelf porn, these would be, it would just be amazing to see this in really high quality paper. In 1986, just after Crisis on Infinite Earths had ended, there was a 4-issue miniseries which is written by Neil Posner and drawn by Craig Hamilton. And footnote, these are both, unfortunately, Neil Posner has passed away, LGBT creators. And this has Aquaman, again, in a somewhat politicized environment, really taken out of his depth. They provide a new costume for the character, and that must have been a bitch to draw. It was based on the conception of an aquatic-based camouflage. And again, there's some like psychodrama with Mira. Over the course of those 4 issues, primarily through the art, it's a really well-executed redefinition of Atlantean culture, which did continue in some threads. When Peter David took over the Aquaman franchise, he had a very broad landscape to provide in the Atlantis Chronicles, which is a 7-issue miniseries. Aquaman doesn't even appear until the 7th issue. So post-Crisis, that was really the full rebuild. But anybody who I've recommended this series has come away, at least from the art, because Craig Hamilton, who's done very little comic work, is a really impressive artist, and I hope at some point that does get collected. At least if right now you can find those issues really inexpensively, and the series is just called Aquaman, 4 issues from 1986. So if you want to hit the earliest Aquaman stories with what I would consider storytelling with some depth, no pun intended, those were the 3 that I would go to. And Steve, you've been reading Aquaman in the current day, as have I. And so why don't you tell us what's currently going on with the character?
Well, first I do have to say that I haven't really read a lot of Aquaman up to very recently.
Uh-huh.
And
I've read a shit ton of Aquaman in my life.
Yeah, yeah, and so what I've read completely doesn't hold a candle to what you've read over your time. Although I did read the Atlantis Chronicles back in the early '90s. I found a bunch of back issues, and I liked it. It's very interesting. And yeah, like you said, Aquaman doesn't even appear in it, but it is the history of Atlantis. Kind of does to Atlantis and that mythos what World of Krypton did at around the same time, I would think.
Yeah, it's interesting though, about the
history.
only concept that hasn't been offered that is Themyscira. You have had Amazon miniseries, but you haven't had that history.
But doesn't Themyscira kind of present a weird problem in the fact that everybody's kind of immortal, and so those characters have been around since the founding of Themyscira, and the only sort of new child was Wonder Woman. So
but still, they
we've
couldn't
seen
have
a
been
lot
living
of
in
that.
a loop. There must be interesting stories to be told.
Yeah, I'm sure where they got the purple ray and how they built an invisible jet. I don't.
And the Kangas.
If you go back.
Yeah.
And what about all of those books of pleasure that Diana talked about in the film that we need to talk about? But how did they research that? But yeah, so what I've been reading recently, and again is very recent, towards the end of last year, I'd say in like maybe started around September, October, Aquaman and the Justice League had a big crossover event called Drowned Earth, and this is I think the first Aquaman and Justice League crossover since Throne of Atlantis back in 2012, was it?
Yeah.
So early on in the New 52, so now post Rebirth, this is kind of the first big crossover event for them, and it's very interesting. It comes on the heels of a very serious situation for Aquaman, and they kind of allude to it. I didn't read much of I think it was the Fall of Atlantis. I didn't really read much of that arc in the Aquaman series up to that point. But starting with a sort of a one-shot issue that came out not too long after, I think it was issue 40, they introduced the concept of drowned Earth. So it kind of acted as a prelude, where Aquaman and several members of the Justice League go up to the northern area, somewhere in the Arctic Circle, to, I guess, investigate something that was buried under the ice. There's some other stuff that he had been, doing prior to that, but what happens there is he gets sucked into what equates to a Atlantean phantom zone, where these ancient sea gods from all over the universe have essentially been imprisoned since the days of, I guess it was Atlan, centuries and millennia before. And in their time of imprisonment, they've kind of gone insane, and so they decide to unleash hell upon the planet and quite literally drown the Earth. Using this dark water, every human that it touches turns into a gruesome mer creature, and there's really no escape from the water. So everybody, including members of the Justice League, other heroes, etc., they try their hardest to keep back the rising waters and to keep people safe, but as soon as they touch it, or the people that they're protecting touch it, they turn into, vicious mer creatures as well. So it's very much an apocalyptic storyline, which usually happens when you involve the Justice League. But here, really, the only person who can really stop this has to be Aquaman. It's part of his legacy. It's part of his Atlantean heritage, and in a way, he feels quite responsible for it, because it was Atlantis who imprisoned these sea gods under the pretense of friendship. And so he and Wonder Woman, who remains untouched by the evil dark water, and sort of a half transforming Flash, whose super healing speed is kind of holding the infection at bay, have to somehow figure out a way to reverse the effects and stop the evil gods from completing their plan and taking over the planet. It's a really interesting storyline. There are a couple issues that it does cross over with, other than just Aquaman. It's also in Justice League, and there's a few other side issues. I think Teen Titans also factors into it. I did read the not Teen Titans, but Titans. I did read the Titans issue, and that's Titans number 28. There is a glaringly huge mistake in Titans that unfortunately kind of is a little bit of a problem if you are reading very closely into the rest of the crossover. If you're just reading Titans, it's not going to do anything for you. You're not going to notice it. But the fact that Aqualad is also transformed into one of the mer creatures, the evil mer creatures, in that issue, and the fact that if you look at some of the Justice League issues and Aquaman issues, you see members of the Titans also transformed into mer creatures, which did not happen because they were sucked into to the other side of the universe. That could be a little bit jarring, but it's a small mistake. It's where there are multiple artists that were taking part in this. Dan Abnett and James Tynion IV held down their respective books. Yeah, but it's one of those things. Like, you'll see it. I'm not going to point out the page and panel, but it is one of those things where I'm like, editors. It's a minor thing, but pay attention because people are.
You'd think it was an X-Men comic. All right.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the crossover. I thought it was very cool. It was very action heavy. Very high on the dread factor, massively high stakes where, hey, it's the end of the world if they can't figure out how to fix this. And there's really nothing that can be done. You've got Batman trapped in the Hall of Justice that's now, hundreds of feet underwater, in a metropolis that's been completely drowned and is now, assaulted by, thousands, if not millions, of mer creatures transformed humans. It's very cool. It's a very cool, very interesting thing, and it doesn't it does not leave the reader wanting for a lot of Aquaman mythos that they may not have known before.
Mm-hmm.
Opens up also the idea that there are other heroes or other sea gods like Poseidon out there in the universe that have their own sort of ways of doing things and their own power sets and mythologies, which is actually pretty interesting, and it kind of expands Aquaman's world a lot more than probably they have plans for right now. But somebody else down the line could probably do a lot of work with that. And it does also lead into the new, I guess, the new fresh start for Aquaman in number 43, where Kelly Sue DeConnick takes over for the writing duties, and kind of leaves Arthur with a blank slate at the end of this crossover in Aquaman Justice League Drowned Earth number 1. He's left sort of washed up on shore without any memory, and that leads directly into Aquaman number 43, which I did also read. And I know, Bill, you had some interesting impressions on this one.
Yeah, I don't like to provide judgment based on one issue, and I do like Kelly Sue as a writer, but I did not think this was her finest moment. The main thing that I came away with it was I was bored. It seems this taking a character out of his comfort setting and providing him with amnesia. I've seen that a couple of times before, and we even see that right now with another DC title in relation to Nightwing. And it just didn't feel like a very effective story. I don't have any kind of problem doing an Aquaman shakeup. If anything, between the events that we've seen since Rebirth, I don't think taking a break from Atlantis is a bad idea at all. We've had a lot of it, but I just didn't think this was the most effective way to go about that. But I'm also not going to judge a run by the 20 pages I see in the premiere issue. I might feel very different after the second issue. It just wasn't anything that really sang to me.
Yeah, and since I don't have Dan Abnett's other 40 issue legacy to kind of pull back on to see what the direction of this series was up to this point. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I really just kind of jumped on.
Whole lot of Atlantis.
Yeah.
A big heap and scoop of Atlantis.
If you're thinking about it that way, here's Kelly Sue coming in and taking him completely away from that and just looking at who the character is, what makes him tick. Ask the usual amnesiac character questions are, is a person the sum of their memories and experiences, or is there something deeper there? But also kind of keeps him in, like you kind of joked earlier. Hopefully you don't cut that out. But he is sort of in his element here. He's in a seaside town. They're right on the water. The ocean plays a massive part in this town's culture, which is very strange and secretive. Kind of it's a village or a town of outcasts that somehow, at least as one of the characters explains, have angered the ocean in some way, and so they're essentially biding their penance by living and making a life in this town, which doesn't seem like too much of a horrible place, except for the fact that they have to eat a lot of potato soup most of the time when they're not fishing. But there's some intriguing little crumbs that are thrown in here that are very Kelly Sue. There's a mysterious, almost mystical woman who's somehow related to another darker character who has been banished to a nearby island. There's truthfully something going on with the ocean where it's not just tall tales or folk tales, but there is some kind of force that's working there. On this village and on the sea around it. It's very much a slow burn. If you've read Bitch Planet, if you've read Captain Marvel from Kelly Sue, this, like Bill said, this is not going to be that right in your face, jump out at you and hit you with action and lightness and a message right away. This is more of a I won't say exactly like Pretty Deadly, but I think there's a little bit more of a slow development, a very slow burn, if you will, of the story and the direction that it's going to go to in the first arc. So we'll see. It's definitely a wait and see approach, but I'm actually going to continue reading this. So this is, having Drowned Earth sort of give me a nice big crossover there with Justice League. I will keep reading Aquaman from Kelly Sue and Ronson Rocha, who his art, by the way, is absolutely beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And the colors, I do have to say, there is some striking color design here with Kaylee or Kaye, whoever to pronounce her name, with her red cloak, which I guess maybe might be a little bit of a Little Red Riding Hood reference. Who knows? But
one thing I do have to say about the series, though, that is not a dig. I was intrigued by the Mystery Woman.
Mm-hmm. Like, what's she doing hanging out there with a dead rabbit? Like what's her whole obsession with Aquaman's name and finding a description for it or a name that fits, which is really interesting. And again, we were talking about who or how Aquaman's presented in comics and now on the big screen. This is kind of along the same lines. I think that some of this so far is starting, a discussion, at least, from Kelly Sue's perspective. What kind of person is Arthur Curry? Like, what kind of person is Aquaman?
Mm-hmm.
Is he super manly, like what they've been calling him Andy, which just means manly? Or is there something deeper? Is there something more there, something dignified, regal,
Or is he an Aquabro?
Yeah. Is he an Aquabro? Maybe he really likes just fishing and stuff, Like, it's interesting. To me, it's a good start. I know you were kind of a little bit more meh about it.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see what happens.
I just didn't find it to be particularly kinetic.
Now, I do have to say that he still has a beard, so I am fully supportive of Aquaman with a beard. So
yeah, it's funny. Like, I like all versions of Aquaman. I like Aquaman bearded. I like him with the long hair. I like him with the very short hair. I don't know. I like them all. I like them all. I like them all.
You like them all.
I sound like Liza. I like them all. Well, maybe since they had a cameo from Julie Andrews in the first film, maybe one. Can you imagine a Liza Minnelli sea creature? Oh my god, that would be amazing.
Mama, I got all these teeth, Mama.
Oh, it's a little bugger. I can do it all day.
Look at this. Look at what's going on. Look what my legs are doing. I got all these legs. I'm a crab. Ooh.
Do you think the fishes go wear the culottes?
Fishes with the culottes. Oh my god.
Man, we are making some like really fringe references here. Oh, okay. That's gonna be in my head all like how to fit Liza Minnelli in the Aquaman sequel. That's oh my god, that's gonna be everything now. All right, we're gonna wrap this episode up, and when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast up, we do so with this segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment, where we spotlight something, be it a comic book or a film or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, may be interested in sampling. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
Well, I've got two woofs. I've got a really quick unserious. Yeah, I've got an unserious woof. This is just sort of like a ha, just a jokey woof. But basically, I do have to say that Sean Teal in The Gifted, he's the one who plays basically Eclipse. He has a very nice beard going on now. I think they've let him grow it out a little bit, so it's less weird, sparsy, scruffy. Now it actually looks pretty good. But anyway, moving on from that, my actual woof is to Schitt's Creek. Again, TV woof.
Hard to believe you're doing a TV woof.
Yeah, which they can't say on TV unless they print the logo, apparently, in the US. In Canada,
no, that is a CBS thing. We don't know if that's across the board.
Really?
That's
okay.
a CBS thing. CBS allows them to say Schitt's Creek as long as they have the logo for the show on the Chiron. I don't know if that extends to the other networks.
I'm not sure if it's other networks.
Can you tell I've been following this too? Yeah, okay.
The only network that it's airing on in the
Yeah.
U.S. is Pop, which is a cable network that you might not have on your list of 3,000 channels that you have with Spectrum or Xfinity or Verizon or whatever. But in Canada, it is airing on CBC, and yesterday it did premiere for season 5, which is amazing that the show is already on season 5. So, of course, if you're not familiar with it, Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara are the parents of two grown and yet completely not at all
Grown up.
mature children. Yes. Played by Dan Levy, who is Eugene Levy's real-life son, and Annie Murphy. Dan Levy and Eugene Levy are the creators of the show. Dan Levy has actually written quite a few of the episodes. And basically this formerly rich family gets shunted to this podunk town in the middle of anywhere Canada or anywhere US. They never make it very clear where it is, called Schitt's Creek, where they live in a motel run by Emily Hampshire's character Stevie. And the mayor of the town, played by Chris Elliott in his Perfect Redneck, Roland Schitt and his wife Jocelyn Schitt. And then, of course, the children have, the son and daughter have their own respective love interests as well in the town, where Annie Murphy's Alexis is in love with Ted, who's the vet, and Dan Levy's character David is in love with Patrick, who he runs the local I guess it's sort of like a gifts store.
With sundries. I don't know how to.
Yeah, they sell candles.
I think I just wanted to say sundries. Yeah,
sundries. But I think what really makes this shine is several things. The supporting cast is amazing. They're great. Everybody. I am shocked that they are just constantly breaking on screen, and that they can actually film a season in normal time without cracking up hysterically at all the antics. Catherine O'Hara she's a genius. She's just amazing, as are her wigs. So, characters in their own right, and in fact all have names. So if you haven't watched this, please check it out. I believe it's on Netflix. You can see the previous seasons.
Yeah, it is on Netflix. I'm not sure when season 5 drops on Netflix. I'm not exactly sure what that schedule is.
It probably.
But I don't think it's too long in time.
Yeah, like probably much later in the summer. You'd probably have the 5 seasons, but all 4 seasons are up and available if you want to watch that on Netflix. And if you're in Canada, it's on CBC, and if you're in the US, it's on Pop.
And I have to say, if you're looking for an effective season finale, oh my God, the season finale for season 2, those last few minutes when there's the party in the barn, it's just a beautiful. Beautiful sentiment to end that season on. Absolutely love it.
Well, and another thing too, I think it's in season 3 is when Patrick serenades David in the open mic at the store, which is amazing, and definitely is very hard not to tear up on.
Yeah.
And also even better because if you look at some of the behind the scenes videos, you find out that Catherine O'Hara also teared up on it in real life while she was there filming it. So it was really amazing. Really great show. Lots of heart to it, as well as ridiculous humor.
Okay, well, for my Wolf of the Week, I'm sticking with Aquaman. Is that okay?
I'll allow it.
Okay. But what I'm going to provide for my Wolf of the Week is content that appears on the DC Universe app, and that is DC Spotlight Aquaman. With the current situation that we have where there is less and less funding going towards special features for Blu-rays and DVDs, it seems that some of these content-based apps may be taking up some of the slack. So what you have in DC Spotlight Aquaman is a 45-minute documentary about the history of the character. And it's very comprehensive. It's very well done. I'm almost certain it's going to appear as a bonus feature on the inevitable Blu-ray for the Aquaman film that we discussed on this episode. You do have coverage of Aquaman in the comics. Many of the principal artists that have overseen Aquaman. You have an interview with Ramona Fradon, who drew Aquaman for years and years and years, was the first woman to draw the character. I believe she's 94, and she's sharp as a tack. It's wonderful seeing that. You see the evolution of the character in film and outside, all these other tangents that relate to the character, like his, I'm going to put quotations, presence as part of Entourage. It's really well done, and I'm a sucker for documentaries of any type, and when they're comic book based, I'm even a bigger sucker, so that's my wolf, DC Spotlight Aquaman. And one thing I do have to say, folks, is DC Universe app is rotating content, so if it's here today, it might not necessarily be there this time next month, so don't delay. Okay, we're going to wrap this one up. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on Facebook as the Comic Book Bears podcast. If you want to write to us, you can do so by writing an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. And if you want to listen to us, please subscribe to us through iTunes, listen to us through Stitcher Radio, or catch us on some of the other podcatching systems. Until next time, I'm Billy Z.
And I'm Steve Morey.
You're going to hear a woof and an explosion, and we'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Woof! Aquaman! Aquaman! No one greater than Aquaman, King of Atlantis, King of the sea. Where the danger is, that's where he'll be. Always defending you, yeah, you and me. Aquaman. He can swim faster than the fastest thing in the sea or on the land. With Mira, his beautiful queen, beside him, he'll fight with all his might till the end. Oh, you can always depend on mankind's truest friend, Aquaman. The place that he loves to be, always defending you, yeah, you and me. Aquaman, he can swim faster than the fastest thing in the sea or on the land. With Mira, his beautiful queen, beside him, he'll fight like dynamite till the end. Oh, you can always depend on mankind's truest friend, Aquaman.